Hey everyone, how are you today? I hope you are having a wonderful day on purpose. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, based on wherever you're tuning in from. Let's get on the docket. We are here to discuss Sean P. Diddy Combs. Now, I know it's no big secret that Diddy is currently going through quite a bit of legal trouble. Legal woes have been plaguing him left and right. If you caught my live yesterday, you heard and learned that his civil suit count has grown. So yesterday, Tony Busby's law firm released 5 additional suits against Sean P. Diddy Combs. One in particular, well, all of them, honestly, were just out of this world to me and just unreal. I'm still thinking how could he do this? I'm kind of stuck in that place. How and why? That's really the bigger question. And a lot of people have been giving their 2 cents. One person in particular is Gene Deal. Now, Gene, for those of you who do not know who he is, was part of Diddy's organization as security. He was a bodyguard back in the 90s. Now, Gene has been very vocal even before Diddy got indicted. But I want us to take a listen to one of his latest interviews that he had on the 23rd of September. Now, on the 23rd of September, Diddy has already been indicted and taken into custody. So Gene is going to weigh in on his perspective as to the allegations and the indictment. Now, we're going to pay close attention, y'all, because what Gene has to say, it kind of took me back. I was taken aback by it because, well, let's listen and I'll chime in. I'll interject as I see fit. All right, guys, if you haven't hit the like button already, please take a moment to do so now. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, go on ahead and subscribe today. Set your notifications to all so that you're notified when I go live or add new content. Let's get into this, guys.
He's ex-bodyguard. I have not seen this one yet, but he has been the one that's exposing most of these things. So he's got some stuff about Usher and Neo. Let's check it out.
So I know, I know people gonna jump on this like a fat rat in a cheese factory, but I don't care. When we were in the studio one night, Dawn wasn't there. But Puff had his little street team, engineers in there, and he said, and I said this before, he said, they're gonna keep messing with me, and I don't know who that they was. It could be their parents, it could be their management team. They're gonna keep messing with me, and I'm gonna drug all them up and pimp them out to my nigga. That's what Puff.
You heard what he said? Did y'all hear what Gene said? I want to know if y'all heard what Gene Deal just said. Let's continue.
said about Danity Kane.
About
Whether he was
Danity Kane.
playing, because they was laughing and joking, and I said out of my mouth in front of him, man, them somebody's daughters. What the fuck is you talking about, Nick?
He may say he's joking, but he's not. That stuff is happening. That little white girl he adopted, guarantee that stuff was going on. His stepson, he even talked about it. I forget his name, Quentin or something.
I got daughters. That's exactly what I said and walked out the studio. So my whole thing about that is this. If he did it, or if he wasn't playing, did he say it out of his mouth? Yes, he did. Did I hear him say that? Yes, I did.
Yeah, why would he make that up too?
But I ain't in the indictment.
You think he gonna get sued by any other bad boy artists?
It depends on where they at in the music business.
See, he knows he's safe. That's why he's talking about all this stuff. As far as like he probably really wasn't involved in any of this, because it will come out in this case. Like, you know,
it depends on what they trying to do in the music business. Some of them might be still trying to write behind the scenes. Some of them still might be trying to sing, do songs or whatever. It depends on where they at in the music business, man. Because what happens is that's just like I explained that the other day on the Gene Deal show, is that when individuals have a dream to be something, whether it's in sports as an athlete, whether it's a band member in the music business or a singer in the music business, or even a comedian, when somebody has the power over you, you may not come out, bro. You might not say nothing. You might just keep trying and fake it.
he's not wrong. Like, especially you have nothing, you know, you're working a 9 to 5 maybe and doing this music stuff on the side. He gives you a little taste of what it's like, you know. You see those thousands in your bank account. He's taking you to these parties. You know, I totally understand.
Get it till you make it. And I think
what I think is the funniest part of all of this is Diddy is sitting in a cell right now.
This is crazy. Gene Deal is just out there. I'm sure, and just so you guys know, there was also a motion submitted by Diddy's legal team today in their attempt to close down a lot of the chatter, a lot of the coverage that the media is doing. Tony Busby, they referenced him in his press conference, stating that, people are being allowed to make highly prejudicial statements, as well as filing cases against the mogul, which, according to his defense, robs him of his right to a fair trial, his constitutional rights. So they're shooting their shot on that. And the judge basically said, bring your briefs with you and draft a proposed agreement for, a gag order. And they would discuss and review it on 10/30/2024. That's the next time they meet. So I don't know what that means or what that looks like, if the judge is going to honor a complete gag order, which would forbid anyone and everyone actively participating or potentially people who could be called as witnesses and or alleged victims and their counsel may have a gag order. That does not mean that there won't be case information as far as motions filed and different things of that nature available to the public via Pacer. But we will not know what that looks like until October 30th. Now, the next one I wanted to touch on briefly is there is a wild lawsuit. And when I say wild, I mean, I'm going to read some of it. I am going to read some of it, y'all. But I'm going to play this clip. It's a news clip of Ariel Mitchell, who is the attorney representing an accuser in a lawsuit filed in California. All right, so let's cue this video.
And so I need to give you a massive flashing red warning.
Okay. Now, this is going to be the news clip, but I'm going to go ahead and read some of the actual lawsuit factual allegations to you guys, because this is like the craziest one that I have heard so far. I've heard a lot of them, but I've read a lot of them, I should say. But this one in particular, it's a lot. It's being brought by Ashley Parham, and in it, she names Sean Combs, aka P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, Love, Puffy, and Diddy, as well as Christina Parham, Shane Pierce, Does 1 through 3, and Jane Doe. So now let's listen to the news clip. Hey guys, I see you coming in here. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining. Be sure to hit the like button while you're here. All right, so let's get into this news clip.
I need to give you a massive flashing red warning here. What I'm about to say is quite disturbing. There's a lot of uncomfortable language. And if you are triggered or upset by sex assaults and violent assaults, etc., then this is definitely not the show for you tonight. The accuser is named Ashley Parham, and she has agreed to allow her name to be made public. Let's be real clear about that. She is going public with her name. She says that in February of 2018, she met a man named Shane Pierce at a bar, and that Shane FaceTimed Diddy outside on sidewalk, apparently trying to impress her. But Ashley Parham says that she told both Shane and Diddy on FaceTime that she wasn't impressed. And this is important. She says she believed that Diddy had something to do with the murder of Tupac Shakur and said as much. Allegedly, Diddy warned her that she would pay for saying something like that. So let's just fast forward now to a month later, where she says this guy Shane invited her to come to his apartment. And the lawsuit says, quote, plaintiff and defendant Shane then began to watch a movie, and defendant Shane offered her a glass of water, which he retrieved and brought back to the plaintiff. A few minutes later, Ashley Parham says that P. Diddy showed up with an entourage, including his top aide, Christina Parham, an unnamed woman who is not a defendant in the suit, and 3 unnamed men, one of whom she says was Diddy's driver, and Parham says that driver waited outside throughout the whole of what I'm about to tell you. Parham says that Diddy was antagonistic from the start and that he put a knife to her face. And now this is where I start reading directly from the complaint.
Okay, so she's claiming that this guy Shane, who she met, called her on FaceTime, or called Diddy on FaceTime to show her, I guess, that he knew him. And she kind of let on that she felt like he had something to do with Tupac's unaliving. And allegedly, Diddy said that she would pay for that. And now, fast forward, she's at this dude's, Shane's apartment, and Diddy shows up. So Shane may have been one of his employees, maybe, or I don't know who this Shane Pierce guy is, but let's continue to listen to these allegations, guys, because like I said, this one is like, it's like a whole horror film.
Defendant Shane then partially undressed plaintiff, and then defendant Diddy removed the remainder of plaintiff's clothing, removing a knife from her face, and then retrieved a bottle of liquid from a large fanny pack. Defendant Diddy then squirted a bottle of liquid on plaintiff, which placed her in fear that she was being squirted with a chemical substance like acid. Plaintiff soon realized the substance was an oil/lubricant. Plaintiff was squirted with this liquid substance all over the entirety of her naked body. Defendant KK was then told by defendant Diddy to insert what looked like a syringe from sterile packaging into plaintiff's vagina. Defendant KK did as told, and then told defendant Diddy that she was unable to use the IUD because it had prematurely been released from its packaging.
You guys know what the IUD is, right? An IUD is to prevent an individual from getting pregnant. And the weirdest part of it is how would Christina Parham know how to insert and place an IUD into a woman? Like, what? This is look, this is all alleged, but this is one of the craziest lawsuits that has been filed to date against Diddy. Like, if he did all of this, if he had access to birth control products and was inserting them into people without their consent, and oh my goodness. Let's continue.
And an IUD is a birth control device. Defendant Diddy, upset by this, took the so-called syringe from defendant KK and tried inserting it into plaintiff's vagina instead. Defendant KK and Diddy began to argue as defendant KK continued to advise defendant Diddy that since the IUD had been prematurely released from its packaging, there was no way they could insert it into plaintiff's vagina effectively. After some time, defendant Diddy heeded the advice of defendant KK and removed the syringe from plaintiff's vagina and handed it to defendant KK. Defendants KK and Jane Doe then exited defendant Shane's residence, leaving the plaintiff alone with defendants Diddy, Shane, and Doe's number 1 and 2. Defendant Diddy then picked up a television remote that was near to plaintiff and violently inserted it into plaintiff's vagina. Defendant Diddy, while violently raping plaintiff with a television remote, told plaintiff that her life was in his hands and that if he wanted, he could, quote, take her and she would never be seen again. Plaintiff began hysterically crying from the threats by Diddy, along with the pain of being violently, vaginally raped by defendant Diddy with the television remote, as well as the lingering pain from the ordeal with the IUD syringe insertion. Defendant Diddy then instructed defendant Shane to turn plaintiff on her stomach, seemingly tired of hearing plaintiff's blood-curdling cries. Defendant Shane then grabbed plaintiff by her abdomen and hips and turned plaintiff on her stomach. Defendant Diddy then instructed defendant Shane to put a pillow over her head because he didn't want to see her face or hear her cries, and instructed defendant Shane to anally rape plaintiff. Defendant Shane did as he was told by defendant Diddy and began to anally rape plaintiff. Defendant Diddy then violently raped plaintiff anally after defendant Shane. Defendant Doe number 2 then joined defendants Diddy and Shane, taking a turn anally raping plaintiff. Immediately after defendant number 2 raped plaintiff, he exited defendant Shane's residence. Thanks for watching. Go to join NN.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Now, her attorney has been extremely vocal about her client's complaint, and she said that she feels that her client is recounting actual factual events. Now, hopefully, Ashley has evidence that can ultimately prove all of this, because this story in itself is just, it's a lot. Now, I'm going to go through the factual allegations, okay? Plaintiff met defendant Shane in February 2018 after an altercation with another man at a bar, and defendant Shane came to plaintiff's rescue. While outside the bar with friends and other patrons, defendant Shane FaceTime video called defendant Diddy and was showing people defendant Diddy in the video on his phone, attempting to impress the people with his famous friend. Defendant Shane then showed plaintiff defendant Diddy on his video call, which plaintiff ignored, stating she was not impressed by him knowing defendant Diddy because she believed defendant Diddy had something to do with the unaliving of rapper Tupac Shakur. Visible in the FaceTime call was defendant Diddy and some of his children, including his sons Christian and Quincy. It appeared from the plaintiff's perspective, defendant Diddy was having a get-together at his home during the time of the FaceTime call with defendant Shane. Defendant Diddy heard plaintiff's statement and made a remark that plaintiff would pay for her statement regarding Tupac, an overall dismissal of defendant Diddy. On March 23, 2018, defendant Shane invited plaintiff over to his home to assist him with his cancer medications because he stated he was weak and unable to open his medications. Upon plaintiff's arrival, defendant Shane informed plaintiff that he wanted to give her a ride in his new car. Plaintiff and defendant Shane left his residence for a brief period and then returned. Once they returned, defendant Shane left the door to his apartment partially opened and stated that the door was ajar because there was an issue with the door where it couldn't close completely. Defendant Shane was renting an apartment on the lower floor of a home in Ordina, California. Defendant Shane had a separate entrance into his residence that led to the backyard of the home. The home also had a main entrance on Luma Vista Drive. Defendant Shane rented the home from a woman who lived in the upstairs portion of the home and had 2 dogs who resided with her. Plaintiff and defendant Shane then began to watch a movie, and defendant Shane offered her a glass of water, which he retrieved and brought back to plaintiff. Approximately 10 minutes after plaintiff and defendant Shane returned from their drive, defendant Diddy entered defendant Shane's residence. Defendant Diddy entered the home in a grand, ready-to-party manner. His grandiose entrance was so loud that the dogs upstairs began barking. Defendant Diddy did not enter the home through the backyard entrance, but instead through the main entrance. Along with defendant Diddy were his bodyguard. It should say bodyguards, plural, but whatever. Defendant Doe 1, a woman who plaintiff later identified as defendant KK. Another woman, small, skinny build, early 30s, with blonde mid-length hair, who plaintiff has still been unable to identify. Jane Doe, defendant Doe number 2, who upon information and belief is a friend of defendants Shay and Diddy, and defendant Diddy's driver, Doe 3, who remained outside in his vehicle during the duration of plaintiff's assault. Plaintiff believes defendant Shane invited her over to set her up to be assaulted by defendant Diddy because of the statement she made about defendant Diddy a month prior. Upon defendant Diddy's arrival, he immediately began to antagonize the plaintiff, stating that she thought she would never see him in person, pay for her statements about Tupac during the video call, and that defendant Diddy caught plaintiff. Plaintiff was in shock as she never believed that she would ever see or meet defendant Diddy in real life, let alone in a small apartment rented by defendant Shane. Defendant Diddy then began advancing towards where plaintiff was sitting on defendant Shane's bed with a knife and held it to the right side of plaintiff's face and threatened to give her a Glasgow smile in retaliation for her previous statements on the video call. So defendant KK told defendant Diddy that she did not think giving the plaintiff a Glasgow smile would be advantageous to their potential clients, who they could sell plaintiff for XXX to. Defendant KK then made a threat to plaintiff that they could ship her off anywhere in the world and that she would never see her family or anyone she knew ever again. Defendant Shane then partially undressed plaintiff, then defendant Diddy, removed the remainder of plaintiff's clothing, removing the knife from her face, and then retrieved a bottle of liquid from a large fanny pack. Defendant Diddy then squirted a bottle of liquid on plaintiff, which placed her in fear that she was being squirted with a chemical substance like acid. Plaintiff soon realized that the substance was oil/lubricant. Plaintiff was squirted with this liquid substance over the entirety of her naked body. Defendant KK was then told by Defendant Diddy to insert what looked like a syringe from sterile packaging into the plaintiff's hoo-ha. Defendant KK did as told, and then told Defendant Diddy that she was unable to use the IUD because it had prematurely been released from its packaging. Defendant Diddy, upset by this, took the syringe from Defendant KK and tried inserting it in the plaintiff's hoo-ha instead. Defendant KK and Diddy began to argue as Defendant KK continued to advise Defendant Diddy that since the IUD had been prematurely released from its packaging, it was no way they could insert it into plaintiff's hoo-ha effectively. After some time, Defendant Diddy heeded the advice of Defendant KK and removed the syringe from plaintiff's hoo-ha and handed it to Defendant KK. Defendants KK and Jane Doe then exited Defendant Shane's residence, leaving plaintiff alone with Defendant Diddy, Shane, and Doe's 1 and 2. Defendant Diddy then picked up a television remote that was near the plaintiff and violently inserted it into her hoo-ha. Defendant Diddy, while violently graping plaintiff with the television remote, told plaintiff that her life was in his hands and that and that if he wanted to, he could take her and she would never be seen again. Plaintiff began hysterically crying from the threats by Defendant Diddy, along with the pain of being violently vaginally raped by Defendant Diddy with the television remote, as well as the linear pain from the ordeal with the IUD syringe insertion. Defendant Diddy then instructed Defendant Shane to turn plaintiff on her stomach. Seemingly tired of hearing the plaintiff's blood-curdling cries, Defendant Shane then grabbed plaintiff by her abdomen and hips and turned plaintiff on her stomach. Defendant Diddy then instructed Defendant Shane to put a pillow over her head because he didn't want to see her face or hear her cries, and instructed Defendant Shane to anally grape plaintiff. Defendant Shane did as he was told by Defendant Diddy and began to anally grape plaintiff. Defendant Diddy then violently raped plaintiff anally after Defendant Shane. Defendant Doe, too, then joined Defendants Diddy and Shane taking a turn anally graping plaintiff. Immediately after defendant Doe number 2 graped plaintiff, he exited defendant Shane's residence. Defendant Diddy then instructed defendant Doe 1 to also grape plaintiff. Instead of immediately graping plaintiff, defendant Doe 1 doused plaintiff with more oil/lubricant, then jumped on top of plaintiff naked and oiled body, treating it like a slip and slide, and knocking the wind out of plaintiff due to his enormous size. Defendant Doe 1 then caught himself from sliding over plaintiff's oiled body and off the bed. He then began graping plaintiff vaginally. While defendant Doe 1 was graping plaintiff, defendant Diddy sat in a chair near the bed and began masturbating while recording plaintiff's grape by defendant Doe 1. Another party's phone fell on the bed near plaintiff. Plaintiff then attempted to grab the phone, but it slipped out of her hands and onto the floor due to the oil/lubricant that had been doused all over her person by defendant Diddy and Doe 1. Defendant Diddy began laughing as plaintiff's attempt to grab the phone Throughout this violent gangbang style grape, defendant Diddy made constant belittling remarks to plaintiff, including that he owned her now. Plaintiff's body was becoming more and more limp over the course of the violent assault until eventually she had no control of her body, nor could she move her body. When defendant Doe 1 finished graping plaintiff, defendant KK entered the room to examine the condition of plaintiff, who was barely able to move or control her body functions. Defendant KK examined plaintiff to see if she needed assistance and was about to give plaintiff an IV. Plaintiff cannot be certain. Plaintiff cannot be certain is if there's a typo. It's supposed to be if. It says is if she did or did not receive such intravenous intervention. Defendant KK then opened a different bag, different than the one defendant Diddy removed the oil from, where plaintiff observed several medicine bottles, IV fluid bags, and other unidentified powder-like drugs. Defendant KK then removed a pill from one of the medicine bottles and gave it to defendant Diddy. Defendant Diddy then inserted the pill into plaintiff's mouth and down her throat to where plaintiff had no choice but to ingest the unknown pill. Defendants Diddy, Shane, KK, and Doe 1 then exited the residence to the backyard where they smoked Mary Jane and cigarettes. Plaintiff remained in an almost lifeless state in defendant Shane's bedroom until she finally regained her bodily functions. Plaintiff then began looking for her clothes and her purse that contained her car keys and cell phone, but could not discover them in the room or anywhere in the apartment. Plaintiff was only able to find a t-shirt on the floor, which she put on to cover her naked body. Plaintiff also observed a black condom wrapper on the floor of the bedroom, which she assumed was used by one of the defendants, most likely defendant Diddy, during the rape. Plaintiff then grabbed a knife from the kitchen and headed to the backyard where the defendants were smoking, as that was the only way to exit the premises onto the street. Plaintiff concealed the knife on her left side as she exited the apartment to the backyard area. Upon coming to the exit of the home, which led to the backyard, plaintiff was met by defendant Doe 1, who was standing at the door between the residence and the backyard. By the time plaintiff was able to compose herself and come to the backyard, defendant KK was no longer in the backyard, but upstairs on the patio balcony with defendant Jane Doe. Defendant Doe 1 allowed plaintiff to walk to the backyard where defendants Shane and Diddy were still smoking. Defendant Doe 1 did not see the knife that plaintiff concealed on her left side, as it was obstructed by the oversized t-shirt plaintiff was wearing. Plaintiff observed defendant Diddy still partially nude from the assault, while defendant Shane and defendant Doe 1 had on their clothing. Defendant Shane then left to the upstairs portion of the patio balcony where defendants KK and Jane Doe were already seated. Plaintiff then sat down on a makeshift seat in the backyard when defendant Diddy noticed her presence and remarked that he was surprised she was able to walk because he had given her enough drugs to take out a horse. Plaintiff then asked defendant Diddy what he gave her, and he laughed and did not provide a response. Defendant Diddy then made further comments to plaintiff of a jovial, friendly manner, asking her why they hadn't partied together before, because it was so much fun and he hadn't had any prison purse that tight in a while. Defendant Doe then Defendant Doe then Defendant Diddy that he probably hadn't had any prison purse that tight because he's not used to having anal XXX with women, which defendant Diddy and Doe 1 laughed at. Plaintiff then told defendant Diddy she did not party with him and did not enjoy partying with him and that he raped her. Defendant Diddy did not like plaintiff's response to his lighthearted commentary and offered plaintiff money and instructed plaintiff to say that the violent rape was consensual and that plaintiff was a ex worker. Plaintiff became enraged and yelled at defendant Diddy that she was raped, it was not consensual. She was not a ex worker, and she refused to take any money from him and would tell the authorities that he raped her. Defendant Diddy then told plaintiff no one would ever believe she was raped by him. And if she did tell anyone such, that they would harm her family. Defendant Doe 1 then showed plaintiff his phone, which looked as if it was the outside of plaintiff's estranged sister's residence, as she could see her sisters sitting on the couch and her sister's spouse on the balcony. It looked as if someone was outside the residence streaming this video to defendant Doe's phone. Plaintiff, while rattled by what she was seeing on defendant Doe's phone, was still angry about being gang raped and was not complying with defendant Diddy's request to take the money being offered to say the rape was consensual. Defendant Diddy then called his mother in an effort to further convince plaintiff not to report her assault. Defendant Diddy's mother yelled at plaintiff to not hurt her son. Plaintiff told defendant Diddy's mother that her son had violently raped her. Defendant Diddy's mother, seemingly unfazed by the statement, then continued her demands with plaintiff to take the money being offered and not report the rape to law enforcement. Defendant Diddy then made further threats that he had gotten off on bigger crimes, that this, and referred to Tupac again, further antagonizing the plaintiff. Defendant Doe 1 then turned to defendant Diddy and pulled his pum on him, asking him to repeat what he said in reference to Tupac. As the two of them were exchanging words, plaintiff went behind defendant Doe 1, where he seemingly began to protect plaintiff. Defendant Doe 1 then advanced to defendant Diddy, questioning him over the comments he made about Tupac. During this commotion, a neighbor directly across the street came outside and peered into the backyard and asked what all the commotion was about. Defendant Doe 1 then pointed the pum at the neighbor and instructed him to mind his business and returned to his residence. Defendant Doe 1 then turned the Pum Pum back on Defendant Diddy. Plaintiff, not far behind Defendant Doe 1, tried to grab Defendant Doe 1's hand that had the Pum Pum. The Pum Pum then went off and hit a hill behind defendant's Shane's residence. This is like a wild story. Okay, so she goes into, I don't understand why she didn't leave, or why she didn't flee, or why did she, sit there for that long. Maybe she was still inebriated from whatever was given to her. I don't know, but I read all of that, and I'm talking about that particular case today because today, in his attorney's response and motion, in Mark Agnafilo's submission to the court, he states that with that particular case, they have proof and evidence that Sean P. Diddy Combs was not in the Ordina, California area on that day. According to his defense attorneys, they have actual proof that he was not there. So we'll see how that goes. And I'm going to be following that legal case in its entirety too, the civil case, to see if her case is dismissed based on the attorney's revelations made in his motion filed in the Southern District Court today. Well, yesterday rather. Now, I also have MatkCurry on the thumbnail of this video, and I found it rather interesting what he had to say. Mark had a few things to say, and this is prior to Diddy's indictment and incarceration. This is prior to. This is the conversation that he sat down and had on June 20th, 2024. And he had a few things to say. Hey, BB London. Hey, Crystal Mods. Hey, let me see who's that. Hey, Libby Lou. Hey, Sherry K. How are you? Just my opinion. He might be called as a witness. Who did he? His attorney said that he would. He's finding it hard to keep him off the stand. Hey, Patrima, how you doing, love? Hopefully, she got. You know what? I hope she did. I don't know what evidence she has, but her attorney is pulling no punches. She's also one that has come out to state that somebody approached her to broker the sale of one of the Diddy freak off tapes, like a catch and kill thing. But all right, y'all, let's get with MatkCurry. Now, for those of you who don't know who MatkCurry is, he was one of Sean P. Diddy Combs's bad boy artists, signed to his label back in the 1990s. Let's listen to what he has to say about Diddy. Now, mind you, keep in mind that this is indeed after Cassie's lawsuit. So a lot of the swirling around had started, and this is also after the feds raided his homes in California as well as Miami, Florida.
Have you on Camera Capone News.
Man, glad to be here, man. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what's up, man. You've been going crazy lately.
Man, you know, it's been spreading, but I'm happy. People been taking good to what I got to say. So yes. Glad to be here. Glad to be thought about. Glad to be known for it. Yep.
Man, that's what's up, man. So you wrote a book a little bit more than 10 years ago. About
15.
15 years ago, about your experience as a bad boy, man.
Yep. It's 15 years ago. I wrote that book, Dancing with the Devil: How Puff Burnt the Bad Boys of Hip Hop. It's a memoir of my life. Just doing business with Bad Boy.
Gene.
I had to write that book in order to have some.
You know what, Sherry? I can see Gene being a government witness. I could also see somebody like MatkCurry. There have been a lot of people who have been vocal and who are actually close to Diddy that have been, speaking openly about what their experiences were. So I could see Gene being a government witness. However, I think that the defense will be able to potentially discredit him, because as far as unless the government has proof to corroborate what Gene is saying, I don't know. I think his defense would work on discrediting what he's saying as hearsay.
Kind of closure to what didn't happen with the music career, but it's there. I wrote it that long ago, man. It's just now becoming a topic to people. A wanted to know topic, wanted to talk about type of thing.
What was going on that made you want to write a book after spending all that time with Puffy?
Well, what it was once I realized that the music career wasn't going, it didn't seem to be taking off. So I was like, okay, I'm a writer, and there's so many different ways for me to write a song or write a book. So I said, instead of wasting the time and spending time writing music, I'm gonna spend a little time to write a book. And right around that time, I started writing the book the same time during my lateral years of being signed as an artist. I started doing the book then. Yeah, and I just had to do it because I was like, okay, I'm gonna attach something to Puff. So no matter whenever he's in the news or whatever may happen to him, whenever people might notice him doing something great, I want them to be able to think of me and also purchase that book. So it was just my way of saying, you know what, I'm gonna have to attach something to him to make sure that I win from this business deal, other than not having anything to show for it.
Okay, now around what time or what year did you guys actually meet and officially, did you join Bad Boy?
See, I knew of him back in 1995, back when they say Bad Boy 1995, ridiculous, back in those years, the words of the great Big. It was around 1995, 94, 96. Those were the years. That's when Bad Boy, he didn't really get the money that he had to sponsor Bad Boy until 1995, up in those years when he signed with Arista. So when he was coming to Atlanta, because we had a club here in Atlanta and a rim shop here in Atlanta, so all of the celebrities would come to Atlanta, and the first place that they would come visit was either the club or the rim shop. So I knew him from a lot of them, not him, but he, just the social circle of those that he keeps around him. I knew a lot of those people, and he just happened to be a part of that circle. So I've been knowing him before I signed to do music. I've been knowing him. I signed in probably 1996, 97. But I've been knowing him from doing coming to Atlanta and all of those kind of things before I signed.
Okay, and now, what was Puff like back then? Did you see any of the stuff that you seen later on in him at the beginning, or did he change at some point, or?
Arrogance, always been arrogant, always still the same arrogant person. You would think that he would change over time, but time didn't really change much with him. He was still the selfish person. You still thought him as being the selfish boss, or the label owner who wants to be an entertainer as well. So it's like competition all the time. Very competitive. Competitive with his artists. I believe he's competitive with himself, but that's just another story,
Okay. What do you think was like one of the first, situations that kind of let you know, like, oh, okay, Puff isn't quite this, friendly guy that I might have thought he was.
How when you say, enough of trying to be friends, if we're going to be dealing with each other on business, let's just deal with business, and let's not confuse the friendship and the business, which was confusing, but I knew that when the business wasn't going as good and the friendship was still there, I was like, hey, man, maybe we got to put the friendship aside and focus more on the business. Because it's easy for you to just get, lost into having fun, going to parties and doing those kind of things. And you'll forget about the business that, like what Puff would do. You can go in there and be like, yo, Puff, I'm here to talk to you today about business. And then we'll talk for a second. But for some reason, he has a way that when you leave out that room, he'll have you going out thinking that you just have one more thing you need to do before you're able to have everything that you're working hard for. So it was always that one song that he was telling me that I needed in order to have this career that I was looking for. And that one song was just something I was working so hard trying to get that one song. And I realized one day that one song don't exist. And I was like, what he's trying to tell me to do, it doesn't exist. It's not a such thing as a one song. It's just a way for you to send me out of this office, not answering my question and having me going out to work hard again. One thing about being an artist, they always try to keep the artist hungry, keep the artist broke, keep the artist starving. And they feel that that's the best way to get the best out of you. So, I guess you can say in so many words, it takes for you sometimes to have to suffer to make you that star, to polish you up to be that diamond that you may be. Diamond, sometimes you got to take a diamond out the rough and polish it up. So like with an artist, they feel like you're like a diamond in the rough. We got to take them out the dirt, clean them up, and, to the world. So, it's the life of being an artist. That makes sense.
At one point, you do actually sign with him.
Mm-hmm.
And what was that day like, and how did it go for you?
Man, I thought that was the best business decision I ever made. And I just knew when I did that, when I signed with him, that everything was going to be okay, because I seen his success rate was real high. And I felt like everyone who was a part of his camp was happy. And I thought that all of them were having their moments of success too. So I thought it was just a great business move, which turned out to be something that it wasn't the best business move, but to still be here, I don't have to be an artist and a music artist in order to be an artist. So I just had to take my artist, my talents and my abilities and apply them into other things other than music. If that makes sense. But I wanted to, man, it felt like I just wanted to just hip hip hooray, just jump for joy. And I was just happy at the moment. And I, calling home, telling everybody in my home was proud of me for what I was doing. Everybody was happy. They just knew I was on my way up at.
Can you imagine him being signed to Bad Boy and feeling himself like, okay, this is the beginning of my career. Yes. And let's continue to listen about MatkCurry's direct experience as working under Diddy as an artist.
Yeah. And that never really happened. You know, we did the song "We Ain't Going Nowhere." It seemed like my career never really went nowhere. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have been on that song, because when I said we ain't going nowhere, bro, I didn't go nowhere. Right after that song, no matter how hot it was, I thought that my career was going to take off from there. You know, career just didn't. He just did not put the funds into, he did not put into me what it took in order to put me out there in the public as an artist, or to promote and market me. Those marketing promotion dollars wasn't behind me.
Now, you were around before Biggie passed away, right?
Yep. Right around 95, 94, right? He died in 97, right?
Yes.
Yep, 97, on March 9th, 1997. Yeah, I was there before the demise of Biggie. Yeah, I used to, in the clubs, when we used to go see Puff in the clubs in LA when he would come. I think when they were out there for the Grammys, because I was an artist and they thought that I came from Los Angeles. So whenever Puff would come to Los Angeles, that's when I would have to go to the studio to kind of wrap songs up most, because we didn't have email. We couldn't email songs. We had to FedEx them. So when he came in...
This is back in the day, you hear? They couldn't even email songs back then. Nope. They had to FedEx the cassette tape so that they could, pass their songs and music and beats around. That's back in the day.
Town, I would go into the studio just to make sure that when he leaves and go back to New York, he has all the CDs and everything that he needs with my music on them. So, like when they came out there for the awards, I was there. I hung out with them briefly for a couple of parties we went to, but then after that, I went back to the studio. And when I went to the studio, that's when I got the news that, Biggie Smalls had got shot out there in Los Angeles, but I was out there the whole time. I was already there. I was on Hollywood and Cahuenga. The studio was over there. That's where I used to work at
Okay, now I seen you talk about in your book that you believe Biggie wanted to leave.
Yeah, Biggie, every person, once you are in that position where you figuring out the best in you and your self-worth, and when you feel, that you're worth more than what you're receiving, then the first thing that comes to you is reaching for another structure, another deal. So that's not something that I find strange or something that just happened with Biggie. It happens with a lot of artists once they see their value, and then they say, hey, you know what? I'm worth more money without this middleman. I'm worth more. I can go directly to a major label and I can have a deal instead of having a middleman deal in place.
Now, this is something that both Gene Deal and Mark Curry have said. They both said that Biggie was actually exploring his options and looking around for a different label for him to join around the time that he was unalived. So could that implicate Sean P. Diddy Combs in Biggie's untimely passing? What y'all think? Because right now they throwing everything at Diddy. And when I say they, I mean his Mark Curry, Gene Deal, Tony Busby, the United States of America. It's a lot of people throwing everything as well as a kitchen sink at him. Like every single thing they're saying he did. So as far as the main allegations, again, he is innocent until proven guilty. But I don't know. They would need to submit some real tangible proof to prove to me that Diddy had something to do with both Pac and Biggie's unalivings.
It's like being signed, like Biggie was signed to Bad Boy, and then Bad Boy was signed to Arista. But Biggie would have probably had a better chance at doing good business had he had been signed directly to Arista, if that makes sense to people who may not understand that one. Bad Boy still has a parent label, whether it be Interscope, Arista. They were never a record label. It was just an imprint under a label.
What was it that made you think Biggie wanted to leave? Did he tell you that directly?
Nah, he didn't tell me that directly, but as an artist, I can understand why, because you're on a label with an artist who's also the boss, and you're not getting the attention that you need. It's like the same way Puff wants to file for discrimination for the liquor companies not putting his liquor brands out there and promoting them like they're promoting the other brands that was on the label. It's the same case, because he didn't promote me as an artist, or he might not be promoting Biggie as an artist as hard or as much as he's promoting himself. So you say, okay, I'm not getting the fair treatment that I deserve on this label, and in order for me to get that treatment I'm looking for, the only thing I'm going to be able to do is get off of this label. So a lot of artists, the Lots wanted to be off of the label. Black Rob wanted to be off of the. Everybody who was on the label wanted to be off the label. In fact, everybody who seemed to have been signed to any label, they always wanted to get off of the label, especially when they felt like the label wasn't treating them fairly.
Now, do you know that was Biggie getting shortchanged with his money? Like, did he not get a good advance or anything like that?
When you think of advances and things like that, somebody's going to give you an advance towards what they feel you're worth. And it's hard to give someone an advance if you don't know their worth yet. So that advance is kind of like not even worth taking sometimes, because you say, hey, if you know that I'm capable of going out and making $100 million, why is my advance only $50,000? If you believe in me the way that you feel that we're going to make numbers, we're going to make 100 million, maybe give me 10 million, maybe give me 15. So the advance that you get is not, it's like being popular, being famous, and being seen on television 1 million times, and you only have maybe $1,000 in your pocket to show for it. That kind of is like it's not balanced. It's not worth it.
You said that Biggie had to sell dope and homemade duplicates of his CDs just to earn some money?
Man, that's when everything in the music industry, every person at that time who wanted to be into the music industry usually came from the streets. So it's almost like every drug dealer at one point in time wanted to be a rapper. And they always wanted to have a record label. So yes, being able to sell tapes and CDs, I've done it. But being able to sell tapes and CDs out of the trunk of your car is just like selling drugs, because you would think that your CD's dope. You would, so it's just the same way that we used to, it's the street movement. Either you're gonna sell drugs or you're gonna sell music. And it was just a choice, when we were coming up, it was like the only two choices that you had. Either you're going to try to be a musician or do music, or you're going to sell drugs. It's either or. So, it was a lot of artists other than Biggie that came into the industry as drug dealers first and then artists second. So
that still happens to this day. It still happens to this day. It's unfortunate, but it's true. A lot of, the popular mainstream rap artists, they rap about what their life is truly, about their surroundings. Like most of them, not all of them, but that's how it is.
Yeah, it sucks. I still had to do things that I didn't want to do, not all legal. And even I was still signed, and I just had to do it to survive. So surviving is different when it comes to being an artist, is you have to survive. So if you're not surviving in your artist, that just makes life bad. So for him to have to be as famous or successful as he was and still had to do those kind of things in life kind of shows that the music industry really doesn't take care of the artists as much as people would think.
Well, recently, Puffy had a lot of serious allegations come out about him. The biggest one was Cassie. She wanted $30 million from him. That's what she was sued for. The next day, Diddy settled. And then, after that, several women came out accusing him of rape and, a whole list of different things, man. What'd you think when you first seen these allegations come out about him?
I thought that when a man falls, the first thing that comes tumbling down is his empire and his enterprise, which is his business relationships between different companies. So when I saw his enterprises, I saw his enterprise fall because a lot of the people were severing ties with him and they no longer wanted to carry business relationships with him. So seeing that was...
Yeah, one major hit that Sean P. Diddy Combs took throughout this ordeal is, well, there's a few major ones. The first is he stepped down from his network, Revolt, that he actually coordinated and spearheaded. He stepped down from that network, and he also, there was one other thing that happened. Oh, he received an honorary degree from Harvard. Now, if you know Diddy, you guys know he didn't finish his college education. He actually dropped out in his second year to take a shot in the industry. And it worked. It worked out for him. He got his shot. But he did never graduate officially from Howard. But they gave him an honorary degree and he gave them a $1 million donation. Once the allegations came out from Cassie, the university took away the honorary degree and they returned every red cent of his $1 million donation. Now that speaks volumes to me. Not only did they take the degree back, but they gave him back every single dime of that $1 million donation. Basically letting him know, we don't want your money. We don't want any dealings with you.
It was the fall. Just seeing that happen, and it's just the fall of man. Every man has his chance and his time to be on top, but every now and then, a lot of us fall off the top. We fall from the top. We fall from grace. We fall from being loved by people around us that love. We fall from being liked by the public. That's the worst feeling in the world, is when the public turns their back on you and they start seeing you for who you might actually be. So when I saw all of this coming down on him, I knew that this was an enterprise falling. Like it was big, because it's gonna hurt him. It hurt him in a lot of ways other than just in music. It hurt him in the school that he was being a part of. They didn't want to be a part of him with. It hurt him where they didn't want him to come to the Grammys. They didn't want to invite him. But then I think they turned around and gave him a Grammy too, right? They're giving him a Grammy this year, 2024. They're giving him a Grammy. But when we look at the Grammys and we're looking at the real world and we saying, okay, the Grammys is 1,200 people that are in a group, part their members, and of these 1,200 people, they're the ones who determine who deserves what award. Of 12, and most of these people of the 1,200 are the majority of them are white males. So nothing is racial about it, but and then they not only do they do that? They do the BET Awards. So we having a lot of these award shows, and people are getting awards, and we don't know what they're getting awards for. So, you know, they gave them an award now. They nominate them for an award. But it's just the Grammys. That's just the Grammys. It's not by people's choice. It's by a decision made from within. Like with the MTV Awards, the executives were the ones that made the decision who deserves an award. With the Billboard Awards, the sales and the people's choice is who determines who deserves the award. The Grammys is judged by 1,200 people that are they're members of a group. The Recording Academy is what we call it. That's what they call it. And it's crazy because the CEO of the Recording Academy, he also has sexual harassment charges against him. So it's like all of the higher executive, look at L.A. Reid, he had sexual harassment charges against him. Russell Simmons, he has had sexual harassment charges against him. Jimmy Iovine, he had sexual harassment charges against him. It was like that's something that was happening. It was part of the culture, I believe. And then finally people woke up and said, hey, this is not right. And they're finally speaking up against it.
Yep. Definitely, it was for a very long time a part of the culture. You could get into the entertainment, modeling, music industry. All you had to do was just, be ready to party, ready to have fun, ready to lower your standards, and be willing to play ball. And allegedly, the United States government is alleging that Sean P. Diddy Combs used force, threats of force, coercion, and also created an environment of compliance by supplying alcohol and drugs to his party attendees to ensure compliance with what was, if some of them were probably drugged and didn't know they were drugged, they were probably just passed out. There's an actual recent video that Diddy is resurfaced. Diddy put I think it was a DJ. He had passed out at one of his parties on the couch. Like he had his head down in the couch and his legs up on the side, and he was just passed completely out. And Diddy was like, this is what happens to them when they come to a Diddy party. This is what happens when the white man comes to a black man Diddy party. They pass out. They can't handle it. But now in retrospect, I'm thinking like, okay, was that guy passed out because of being overwhelmed, or was he aided with the amount of drugs he was allegedly unknowingly consuming or openly consuming? Who knows? Who knows? We don't know. But guys, that is all I wanted to share with you today. I will definitely be keeping you guys posted on all of the activities happening surrounding the Sean P. Diddy case. As far as the suit that I discussed today, I'm not saying that this young lady is not telling the truth. I am not. What I'm saying is, that is wild. That is so wild. Like, when I say wild, that's crazy. And then to top it off with his defense attorneys claiming that they have irrefutable proof that he was nowhere near this city in California at the date of the alleged attack. I don't know. I don't know. I'll have to check. Let me check that lawsuit while we're here, y'all. Guys, hit that like button while I check. I'm going to go ahead and do a live check right now. I should have actually checked, because for his attorney to be so bold and boldly state that this woman's suit, essentially he's saying her suit is frivolous. You know what I'm saying? He's basically claiming that it's not true because he wasn't there, allegedly. His attorneys indicate that he was not in Orinda. I think that's the city name, Orinda, California. All my West Coast people, if I am butchering the name of that city, please help me out in the comments. Feel free to give me the appropriate pronunciation. I've never been there. I don't know how to say the name of the city, okay? All right, so I'm going to that particular lawsuit. Let's see, is this it? No, this is not it. Hold on. Hold on, y'all. Let's see. California. I don't remember what circuit is. Let me look it up. Los Angeles, California District Court. Central, okay. So it's in the Central District. Let me go back to Pacer. It's in the Central. Golly. But how is it? That's not her name. So this must be filed. I gotta check. I don't even remember what district she filed her case in, y'all. If this isn't the district, then I'll research it and hold on. No. I don't want to come back with it. I want to know now. Because if they claim to have proof in that nature under the criminal case, they claim to have that type of proof, right? Eastern, I've checked Central. I've checked Central, I've checked Eastern. Now let me check Northern. I gotta check every district in California, y'all. Bear with me. I think this is it right here. Okay, let's see. How is everybody doing today? Let me know in the comments. Is it morning, afternoon, or night for you right now? Replay gang, you can definitely answer my questions in the comments because I will read them. I definitely will. Here is the Parham lawsuit. I found it, guys. I found it. Let's see. Let's see what recent activity. Okay, so it's weird. His attorneys they have not issued certificate of proof service, Florida Bar certificate of good standing. So there is a certificate of pro hack vice. Pro hack vice is basically allowing someone who is out of state to practice in that area. So they haven't even responded to this case, but they're clearly stating, I guess, a part of their argument that they're going to make as it relates to that case. And I'm glad I looked into it before I got off, because to be honest with you, with all the updates that are happening with Sean P. Diddy Combs on a daily basis, it can be hard to keep up. It could easily be hard to keep up, y'all. I am not playing. I am not playing. Now, there are a lot of rumors going around about his mother potentially being indicted next, and Jay-Z and other celebrities being mentioned. Me personally, I'm not going to get involved or even repeat any of those rumors to, discuss them as if they have any merit. Because first of all, there is nothing on paper in black and white stating that Jay-Z and or Beyonce had anything to do with this. All of the other celebrities being mentioned, same deal. There's no documentation showing that they have anything remotely close to do with this. Now, if that does change in the distant to near future, I will update you guys. But I don't know anything about any other celebrities being directly involved with the criminal and or any civil cases against Sean P. Diddy Combs at this time. But guys, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you taking this time with me to review the current goings-ons with Diddy. I will keep you guys updated as updates become available. All right, guys, be sure to comment, like, subscribe, and share.